And we are live. It's Dr. J here in the house with Evan Brand. Today, we're going to be talking about toxins in your water, how to filter them out, the things that we do personally with our patients and our families to keep ourselves healthy and feeling great. Evan, how are we doing today, man?
Doing well. Excited to dive in with you here. Water is something, of course, we all need, duh, but good, clean water is something that we really need. And in the modern world, it's very difficult to get that. And this is a new problem for humanity. Not, not super new. I mean, thousands of years ago, this issue was still happening when societies were trying to create irrigation systems and sewage was ending up in their water and all of that. But hunter-gatherers in general, they didn't have that problem. They'd go to the creek, the stream, the spring, and everything was fine. But now with urbanization, industrialization, with airplanes, with heavy metals, the water is a lot different these days. You look at plastic chemicals. I mean, where do we even start? So you even just the containers that the water is in, even if the water is clean, the container it's in could be a source of toxins too. So how do you want to kick this thing off?
Yeah. So first off, where are these toxins coming from in the water? So first thing is we use certain chemicals to actually clean the water, such as chlorine, for instance. And this will obviously decrease things like microbes and bacteria, E. coli, maybe even parasites, right? But you still have to deal with the fact that we have organisms in our gut called our microbiome, healthy, good bacteria in our gut. And we know things like chlorine can negatively impact our gut and our immune system and the healthy gut bacteria. And we know that we have 80% of our immune system in the stomach, in the small intestine, the gall and the malt. So if we impact that bacteria, it's going to have a big effect on our immune system. So in general, chlorine is one of those things that may have a benefit cleaning the water a bit, but we want to be able to get it out. And then we also have things like fluoride, which may have a reasonable intention off the bat of topically helping our teeth be stronger. But just because it has a topical benefit doesn't mean we necessarily want to put it in our water where it has an internal benefit. It's like saying, well, sunscreen may help you from getting a sunburn, therefore we'll put it in the water. It's like, well, topical data, but it's not really used internally, right? So it's kind of the same thing. And also fluoride is considered to be like a drug. So if you put it in someone's water, you can't really regulate the dose that someone would get that. Some people may drink twice as much water as the next person. So you're not really regulating the dose on that. So fluoride and chlorine are going to be a big one out of the gates, number one. And then you may even have things like pesticide runoff from farmland, GMO runoff from farmland, right? You may have parasite runoff from whatever happening in the lakes and the streams. And you want to be able to have means to be able to get those things filtered out.
Yep. Good points. Good points. And what we have is truly a first world problem, meaning people in second and third world countries, they may have other issues with their water. So this is not just a problem in America and developed countries. There are water quality problems worldwide. We just happen to have a different problem. So we've done a good job at really helping with like the Giardia and the E. coli's and the crypto and that kind of stuff, getting that out of the water. But in regards to the chemicals, we are doing pretty poor. Now, this is a couple interesting just topography type pieces of information. I'm looking up, there are certain cities, it's very, very few, but there are certain cities in the US that have very pure water and they don't require water treatment. And this is going to be very interesting to you. Boston is actually one of those cities. So Boston, New York City, San Francisco, Denver, and Portland, Oregon. These are the largest cities in the US that do not treat their surface water beyond disinfection because their water sources are in protected watersheds and thus are naturally pure. And it goes into Boston and how they get their water from this reservoir and the Ware River and blah, blah, blah. So, and then
when I went to school at UMass, I would drive by the reservoir. It was called the Quabbin Reservoir. It was like huge, but it was a man-made reservoir. I think in the post-World War II that it occurred. But yeah, I totally agree. The thing is, I still would never trust it just because I don't trust there's not some level of pesticide residue running off and getting in there at some way or another. So worst case, even if your water's clean, it can't hurt running it through a really good high quality, activated carbon type of filter that's going to at least keep a lot of that crud out for sure, just to be safe.
It goes into different parts of California and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's too risky. I mean, you could look at what they say and, oh, it's pure because it comes from here and there. But I mean, we've seen I mean, look at the Arctic, right? I mean, we've tested polar bear fat, and you've got all the PCBs and major toxin issues that far away where man has never stepped foot in general. So I think it's just much safer to just assume it's toxic, even despite what you're told.
Well, I remember just, water skiing in Lake Austin, you have all these multi-million-dollar homes on the side of the property with beautiful green lawns. And then when it rains, all that pesticide potential runoff's going into the water, right? And so there's definitely some of that that's happening. So you got to be careful, right? And we even know algae blooms and E. coli can get into the water, things like that. And, we hope some of the chlorine can get to that and help it. But just in case, I think it's worth having at least an activated carbon, higher quality filter through multi-stage processes with some kind of a post filtration as well to kind of get that under control. Usually you're going to get something at a 20 micron level or less or so at a filtration level to filter out larger particulate. Some kind of a really good activated charcoal, activated carbon type of filtration to absorb toxins, which is very helpful. And there may also be other filtration that we do on the reverse osmosis side to get the smaller particulate out. So for instance, a reverse osmosis filter is going to get about 95% of the fluoride out. All right. If we do just an activated carbon, we may only get about 50% of the fluoride out. So an activated carbon, activated charcoal filter, very helpful. It's not going to get all the fluoride out. And there's still natural fluoride that may be in the water, whether it's calcium fluoride, some of the more natural ones that you find there, maybe not the sodium fluoride that's more synthetic, or the hydrofluorosilicic acid that may be a little bit more, let's say, amalgamated with other compounds in there. So you want to have a good whole house filtration system that's at least a activated carbon type of filter. And we're going to put some of the links below that Evan and I both recommend that kind of hit both these categories. So we'll put the links down below for you guys to look at. And these are the products that we personally use with our family and ourselves and our patients. And I've used them over the years. So we'll put those links down below. But the first thing I'd like is at least a whole house or an activated carbon kind of water filter. Now, we can start off with ones that are pitcher based. If you're a student or you're someone on a budget, that can be helpful for just putting water in and running a gravity filter through it. That's helpful. And then you may also want to get a really good activated carbon one for the showers to prevent the chlorine in the shower. We're not so much worried about fluoride in the shower because fluoride's not really a gas, but the chlorine can definitely kind of be more of a gas-like state, and that can also be inhaled when that hot water's coming in. So we want something to really focus on the fluoride and such when we're showering. So a good water filter is going to be helpful. Now, if you get a whole house water filter, the nice thing about that, you don't have to worry about all the different shower heads. You can just put that whole house thing on there and you'll be good to go.
Yep. I wanted to go into a couple more sources of like where you're getting exposed to these toxins, because people just think about drinking, but as you just hit on showering, you're also going to be exposed to it. I've had many clients. I mean, I've lost count how many have had skin issues, and especially those people with histamine issues. If there is a mast cell component to their health problems, just the chlorine alone could aggravate their mast cells and create a histamine response. So if you're noticing that you're having a skin issue, a skin reaction, some type of a rash, you're getting flushed, you're getting red, your cheeks are red, your chest is red after a shower, or just general skin irritation, skin dryness. I mean, people that are trying to improve skin quality, the chlorine from the shower is a big one. Also, dishwashers. Think about the dishwasher. You've got a lot of hot water, and that's really going to be activating that chlorine gas. I've had some clients that were in the kitchen doing dishes, standing next to the dishwasher while it runs, and they're getting a headache and they don't know why. And we traced it back to the chlorine gases coming out of the dishwasher. Now, of course, these are more sensitive people, and you listening may not be that sensitive, but these are the canaries in the coal mine that really show us the true toxicity going on. And then if we're able to implement a whole house filter, of course, that also removes the chlorine from your dishwasher. So now your kitchen is not going to be this big chlorine bomb anymore, which is amazing. And also your ice. Think about people that are doing iced beverages. My wife loves an iced coffee. And if we didn't have a whole house filter, now it is true that refrigerators and freezers, they do have filters these days. However, they're very poor. Generally, they're going to be removing lead, maybe some mercury. But in regards to like your trihalomethanes, your BPAs, your chloramines, your pharmaceuticals, your pesticides, all of that stuff, it's just not the level of purity you're looking for. So your ice is contaminated. You put the ice in the drink and you get exposed there. And then really just to kind of summarize all the toxins, you really have just four big categories. You've got your chemicals, which is like the pesticide. You've got glyphosate. You talked about the pesticide runoff. That's a huge problem because we know that even parts per billion, ppb, which is tiny amounts of glyphosate, kill beneficial bacteria in the gut. So literally, it's almost like you're drinking an antibiotic in your tap water because of the glyphosate. And then in regards to like the, the physical toxins in the water, I mean, whether it's like clay or, just organic material that ends up in the water. I know like the Ohio River where Kentucky gets their water. I mean, you got mud and crap running off into there all the time. And then what about like the biological stuff? You mentioned viruses. We talked about parasites. We talked about bacteria. And then what about like radiation? I mean, that's tough to say, but I don't know exactly the locations I've seen in the desert. You've got like uranium and cesium showing up. Like in California, you've seen a lot of cesium showing up from Fukushima, the nuclear reactor that's still leaking to this day, almost a decade later. So you've got, radiation to deal with. And so all these things add up. And the good news is you and I kind of joked about this, but you can make yourself live in a healthy bubble. And it seems like you're having to go above and beyond and you're just the health freak. But no, this is honestly the standard of care that your water should have. This is really just standard practice. You're really just trying to get back to the water that your great grandparents drank before all these chemicals were invented.
100%. 100%. I totally agree. I'm going to show you a couple of tech sheets here in a second. We'll just look at some of the things that we want to see filtered out. That's going to be very, very important, just because of the fact that we want to make sure we're not getting exposed to a lot of these things. That's really important. The first thing we can do, people talk about like, hey, what about this detox smoothie or these detox supplements or whatever? People are all on this kind of detox kick. Well, the first thing we can do to stop or to support detoxification is stop adding toxic burden to the body. It's the first thing we can work on to prevent toxicity. It's just stop the burden. So that's really where I want to put a lot of people's focus on out of the gates. Now, I'll just take a look at this here off the bat so you guys can see my screen. So with a whole house filter or a really good activated carbon filter, we want to see, so you can see up here, these are a lot of chlorine or chloramine. So these are like kind of chlorine-like metabolites, very, very bad. So we're looking at a 97.6, 98, 99%, upper 90% reduction there. That's really big. Then we have our cysts, our parasites. We're getting a 99.9% reduction there. You could see a reduction in mercury, 98, 97, 96. Nothing's 100%, but you're really knocking down a lot of that load as fast as 99%. And then you're looking at a lot of the hormones. These are really important, right? Bisphenol A, estrogen mimicker, DEET, estrogen mimicker, hormones in the environment. Look, ibuprofen, right? Naproxen, pain medications, all of these things actually can get dumped in the water. People dump it down the drain, and you can see we're at, a mid to upper 90% reduction there. And then these are a lot of the pesticides. These are organic chlorines that are going to be spilt into the water supply via pesticide runoff into our water supplies. That's why Evan's saying, well, these waters may be great. It's like, well, can you really trust? Like, are you going to do an audit of every home nearby and their influence on that water table due to pesticide runoff? But that's a hard thing to quantify, right? So you can see here, these are a lot of the pesticides. Atrazine, right? That's one that can affect your hormone system, 97%. Chlorobenzene, 99%. So these are all nasty chemicals that can easily affect your hormones and reproductive system. So we want to have a good reduction there.
Let me make one other point too, because one thing you were showing was like the allowable concentration. The problem is the standards are not super strict here. And so, you may see that the municipal company allows X amount of parts per million or parts per billion, but even at those levels that they're allowing, even at that cutoff, they could still have toxic effects. Like we talked about with the glyphosate, parts per billion, just several parts per billion is enough to kill beneficial bacteria in the gut. So they're talking more toxicity, like you're going to get cancer if you drink this cup of water. Their cutoff is just not strict enough. Kind of like you and I talk about with natural functional medicine ranges with blood testing and conventional ranges. Like you may look fine on the conventional range, but on the functional range, you and I have an issue with these thyroid markers. Same thing with these here. The EPA or whoever else may set these standards and go, okay, yeah, these levels aren't going to kill you, but we're going to argue, no, this isn't good enough. We want less.
100%. So we like to look at a lot of the active carbon really helping and providing a big benefit of filtering out a good chunk of this. And then when we look at for instance, the reverse osmosis, this is where we're going to knock down more parasites. This is where we're going to knock down most of the fluoride, right? 94%. You can see radium. These are, going to be radioactive compounds in there. So this is where we really knock down a lot of this stuff. So you're going to look at some kind of filter that's a reverse osmosis, which is a very, very small membrane to filter things out. A lot of times the good reverse osmosis will contain some kind of an active carbon, activated charcoal, carbon-based filter in the 4-stage type of setup. Usually some kind of pre-filter, post-filter, some kind of membrane, reverse osmosis membrane that's going to filter things out at a 20 micron or less. And then we're looking at the activated carbon. And then a lot of times there's some kind of a post-filter on the RO, because the problem with the RO is it may knock out healthy, beneficial minerals. Like for instance, look at selenium there, right? Selenium is being knocked down. Now, you're not getting a lot of it in your water. You're probably seeing magnesium knocked down, potassium knocked down. So we want some kind of a filter that will add some minerals back, but we may also use like a really good high quality sea salt and put it next to your kind of sink where you're getting your water to add some minerals back in. So I always have like a nice salt shaker right next to my reverse osmosis filter. And so I'll put a little bit in the morning, maybe a half a teaspoon. I'll add some water. I'll shoot it. I'll drink it throughout the day. And then usually I'm drinking like some Topo Chico mineral water or some Pellegrino during the day in glass. And so I'll hit my reverse osmosis in the morning, before lunch, and then before bed. A lot of times I'll hit it then. So it's really clean. And then my whole house filter is really cleaning up everything, where if I do go to my bathroom upstairs and it doesn't have an RO attached to it, the water's still really good, where I'm still okay having that kind of water. Or showering, having really good clean water in the shower, just knowing I'm not going to get extra exposure to chlorine in that heat, which will go into a gas state and breathe it in.
Yeah, I've had other clients with children specifically who were giving their children baths just in the conventional tap water, and the children were having skin irritation. So the mom says, well, maybe we're bathing the kid too often. So then they would go to an every other day or maybe an every third day. And in some cases, that was enough to resolve the issue. But I pointed out, it's not the bath that's the problem. It's the toxins and the chemicals in the bath. So we could bathe our children every day and we have no issue with their skin at all, versus when we spent a little bit of time in a hotel and we were bathing our kids, we noticed their skin did get more irritated. And, hotels typically have a small bathroom. It's not like a big master bath like we have in a house. And so I remember we'd run the bath for the kids. We'd go into the hotel bathroom and my God, you could smell, the whole room smelled like a swimming pool. I was like, wow, even just these trace amounts of chlorine and chloramines and trihalomethanes, that was enough to create a big issue. And also, I want to point out something. Indoor areas, like indoor swimming pool areas where you have indoor chlorinated pools, those are not good places to be. I've had a massive amount of issues with clients that were working, or, generally children of parents working with me that were lifeguards, and they would start gaining massive amounts of weight when they started there. I mean, this is not just one-off case. This is several cases where as soon as the teenager jumped into the indoor lifeguard thing and they're just breathing in the trihalomethanes all day and the chlorines and chloramines, they gain massive amounts of weight. So I don't know necessarily the mechanism. I don't know if it's the chlorine, damaging the gut bacteria, and then there's a SIBO
Right.
weight gain situation. I don't know the mechanism, but I've definitely seen it. And in Canada, there was a study done. I'm trying to pull it up here because I used to have it bookmarked, that trihalomethanes, they're abbreviated as THM. These are the byproducts in the drinking water after the chemicals are used to treat it. This Canadian study was saying that it was like a 65% of all cancers were attributed to the trihalomethanes in the tap water. Let me just say that again,
Wow.
because this is crazy. It was like 65% of cancer cases were directly linked to trihalomethanes, which are these disinfectant chemicals. There's one here, and there's many if you want to look this up, but long-term exposure to trihalomethanes in drinking water and breast cancer. This was a Spanish study, and they go into chloroform, which we didn't even talk about chloroform. It's too long of a study to get into to read the whole thing. But long story short, you can filter this crap out. So please do it, and don't swim in it. Do salt water. Go to a place, take your kids where they can do salt water and not go in the chlorine. And if you absolutely positively have no option but to take your kids into chlorine, it is true that some of the micronized chlorella products that Justin and I use clinically, these chlorella drops, these tinctures, they have been shown. There are some case studies on reducing and or preventing chlorine exposure. So you would take some of the micronized chlorella before you go into the chlorine, and then you could do a dose afterwards. And that's been shown to prevent any type of absorption of the chlorine. The chlorella is binding on to the chlorine molecule. So in a pinch, I think that'd be a good strategy. And how do we know this works? Well, we've seen kids with autism and other issues where once they would bathe in a chlorinated pool, they would then have some type of a flare or reaction. And those flares and reactions were prevented with the chlorella administered orally before getting into the chlorine pool.
And I think vitamin C also helps with chlorine detox as well. So
Oh,
if
it
you look at
does.
vitamin C and chlorine detox, so it's a natural method of neutralizing chlorine. So it's really helpful. So you can always take some extra vitamin C. You can always take some extra sulfur amino acids as a means to help. Like, I personally have a pool. I have a saltwater pool, and again, a saltwater pool, right? You have sodium chloride. That chloride gets broken off. It gets ionized down via hydrolysis, and that chloride then binds to the H in the H2O, and then it forms. You get some level of chlorine forming based on the hydrogen and the chlorine forming. And so that's how you make natural chlorine. Now, typical acceptable ranges for chlorine in pool is usually 2 to 4 part per million, 2 to 4. And of course, the public pools going to be at that higher level, and they'll shock it more frequently, right? So my pool only gets shocked typically once per year, when I open it. And then I keep my chlorine level down to 0.5 to 1 part per million. So it's at a level where I'm doing about 10 ppm on my salt cell. And that's enough where, one, there's no odor. And two, you can put your eyes in the water, open them up, be underwater all day, and then there's no irritation at all afterwards. So that's kind of like my threshold. Like, number one, no odor, and number two, no irritation to mucous membranes and eyes. Now, one thing I do to help in my pool, I get a copper or a silver ionizer, and it sits in the pool, and then the UV light hits it, and it dispels ions into the pool. And those ions provide some kind of a natural antimicrobial benefit to prevent algae from growing. Because you don't want algae growing, right? If algae is growing, that can be like fuel for other bacteria, other microbes. So you don't want those microbes either. So it's a balancing act of like not wanting your pool to become essentially a pond, right? But you don't want so much chemical in there that you're absorbing it. So I kind of find getting my chlorine level down to a 0.5 to a 1 ppm. I keep my filter going on all the time, 24/7. I just got a new filter, by the way, a new motor for it. The thing lasted 13 years. It was amazing. But that keeps running, and it goes through a sand filter. So it's really, pulling out a lot of the particulate. Obviously, I'm backwashing my pool at least once or twice a week. And then I use that ionizer. So that allows me to keep my chlorine down. I have my pool serviced by a company. And I talked to them. I say, hey, how low, because I've instructed them, I want to keep the chlorine at the lowest possible level before algae or any microbes may grow. I said, out of all the pools you guys manage, am I the lowest? They're like, yeah, they manage 500 pools. I'm like the lowest amount of chlorine out of all the pools. So I try to keep it at that level, and that's kind of a good trick, and it really helps.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you mentioned the vitamin C. That's actually one thing we did too. We were in the hotel, and if we travel and we can't bring filters with us, is they actually sell vitamin C dechlorinization tablets. These are something you can buy online. It almost looks like an Alka-Seltzer tablet. It's pretty funny. But you take these little vitamin C tablets and you throw it into your bathtub, and it works. I mean, you go back into a small room where there's a bathtub filled with chlorine water, you throw in that tablet and it fizzes immediately. You go back in like 2-3 minutes and you no longer smell the chlorine. And apparently this is a widely used practice in aquaculture for raising farm raised fish, that they use the vitamin C to, it says here that they'll use it to treat wounds in farm raised fish. So that's interesting.
I know you can get water filters for the shower filters that have like inactivated carbon kind of filter, as well as vitamin C in it. And that can be helpful at just kind of reducing some of that chlorine load. But if you have a pool, right? If you have a new pool, I like a salt water. And then if you can get some kind of an ozone feature put on there, or you want to add in an ionizer that floats in, that's great. Or if you want to add a UV component, I looked at doing some UV stuff. I didn't feel comfortable with it because there was a couple of recalls on the one that I had for fires. So, but if you're putting a new pool in, definitely look at getting a good system that may have a UV filter on it that will help kind of provide some decrease, microbial activity without adding more chemicals to the water, right? That's the key.
Yep. Awesome. Well, this is an exciting piece of the puzzle for people's health. Is it that all of a sudden you filter your water and your health magically gets better? Well, in a roundabout way, yes. I mean, if you're not putting in heavy metals, if you're not putting in pesticide and herbicide, you mentioned the pharmaceutical drugs too. Those end up in the water, not only from people dumping them into the water, but also just urination, believe it or not. People are peeing out the metabolites of pharmaceutical drugs. They found Cipro, they found blood pressure medication, heart medication, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, pain pills, all from the urine of people. They pee in the toilet, that goes back into the sewers, back into the reservoir. They then filter it again. But, once again, these big municipal companies, they're focused on filtering volume. This is all about millions and millions of gallons that are pretty clean, but not the thousands of gallons you're using in your house ultimately clean. So just want to make the distinction. Those systems are not designed for purity. They're designed for volume. And so when you're getting exposed to these trace amounts of drugs all the time, it makes sense why society is, partially crazy, because they're on all these drugs, and you're having people, dosed at a dose that they don't want. People they're not intending to drink antidepressants, but it's just a byproduct of what's happened. And so, anyway, the good news is I could go on a rant on that forever and people would probably love it. But the summary is you can filter this stuff out. So get it done. As Justin mentioned, we'll have links in the show notes because we're always updating our recommendations. But the links we're going to have for you are things that we use clinically and things we use personally in our own homes and things we even use when we travel. So I hope this has been helpful.
Like it. Yeah, in general. So we kind of talked about it with water. So there's a couple of different stages, right? Let's say you're someone on a fixed budget, you're someone in an apartment complex, a student, right? We have some good recommended kind of activated charcoal type of filters that are more gravity based that are helpful. Now there's like cheaper ones that are out there, like the Brita ones, not quite as good. There's some better ones. We'll put links below of the ones that we like on the gravity side or on the, the portable kind of gravity side where you can put in the fridge. There are some countertop units that are helpful. That are just really good activated charcoal ones. There are some under the counter. So if you have access to drilling a hole in the countertop and putting a tank below, that's wonderful if you can do that. And then we have obviously the whole house. You probably want to be living there to be able to do that one. That's helpful. And then we have different shower ones that can also be helpful too if you don't live there, but you want to clean up the water coming out of your shower. Those are a couple of really good options. We'll put the links down below. And then I hope you enjoyed some of the pool tips I recommended. So that helps you to kind of keep the chlorine down. I always tell people, anytime if you're managing your own chlorine or you have a pool service doing it, get the chlorine down to the lowest possible level where you can't smell it, you can't taste it, it doesn't irritate your eyes or mucous membranes. And at the same time, you don't have algae growing in the pool. So if you can kind of fit that level, maybe 0.5 to 1, maybe definitely 2 or below is ideal if you can do it. And then if you use the ionize or other techniques, that should be helpful too.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Great advice. And share this with your friends, your family. They probably don't even have a clue that toxins in the tap water are an issue, and they don't have a clue that it could be damaging the microbiome. So here you are spending good money on your fermented foods. You're doing your kombuchas, you're doing your kimchis, whatever else. You're taking probiotics, you're fixing your gut issues, but then you go out to the restaurant and you just drink the restaurant's tap water. So this is another helpful step to help you take back your health. So this is Evan Brand signing out, and Dr. J. If you need help clinically, please reach out. justinhealth.com for Justin, Dr. J, me, evanbrand.com. And, sharing is caring. So, share this information. Let's improve the water everywhere. People need the help, all the help they can get. And the last thing we want is you getting exposed to something that you don't have to get exposed to.
100%. So if you guys want to reach out, these are all techniques that we use with our patients kind of day in, day out. In general, if you don't have a good water filtration, you could always maybe go to Costco or Sam's Club and just get some good bottled water. I like Topo Chico. You could do Pellegrino. I like it because they're in glass too. So you don't have any pesticide runoff. So you can always store these at your office or in a little fridge nearby where you're working most of the time. So you can at least go through a liter or two of these during the day and try to have a good, at least the cheaper gravity filter in the pitcher form is always still great. Choose a higher one and then kind of work your way up. That's really important. I remember when I was a student, I think it was undergraduate. I remember this was like 15, 20 years ago. I saved up like a whole week's paycheck to buy a reverse osmosis filter. And it was a countertop portable one. It was like the first of its kind. It was amazing. And I would go buy like these big 3 to 5 gallon, things from Whole Foods. I'd fill it up one day. I'd let it filter for like 5 hours, fill it up. And that'd be my water for like the next 4 or 5 days. And I would repeat every single, half a week. People thought I was crazy back then because ROs were relatively new. So I prioritize my money towards good water. You should too. It's very important. Good foundation for health. We're 70% water. So very important. And if you want to reach out down below, again, we'll put the links and our favorite products that we use with our friends and family and patients. Evan, phenomenal chatting with you, man.